Good morning. Welcome to Actuarial News, where I'm going to go over PSERS and enjoy potentially the music in the background. Yeah, I'm at the laundromat. So let's do this one real quick. PSERS, this is the Pennsylvania Public Schools Retirement System. And I'm going to keep this one short because this is something that's ongoing. I'm not quite sure what happened, but that's why there's a federal investigation, isn't there? Obviously, on the Actuarial news site, and this is going to be the tag PSERS, this goes in reverse chronological order. So this is going to be the most recent, and obviously I haven't updated with all of the news that's out there. So PSERS has signed Varus, and I actually know something about Varus, in emergency hiring to handle CIO duties. Now, Varus, it says Varus Investments, so it does monitoring and oversight of investment, and they have internal and external investigations. So if you hadn't heard about the news, what happened at PSERS is that the investment performance for a specific year had to be restated, or I'm not even sure they restated it yet. Because, and let me see, actually, I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom here. And I'm going to get rid of, here we go. So back in March 14th, I posted a possible $25 million error. And you're saying, well, okay, well, how large is this? It's actually not about the $25 million. It's about the investment return. So in December 2020, PSERS Consulting Actuary Buck reported the system's investments had performed with a 6.38% average annual rate of return over the prior 9 years. And you're like, okay, that meant employees were spared having to contribute more by the slimmest of margins. The investment benchmark was a 6.36% rate of return. And this, I'm sorry to say, what had happened is the Pennsylvania legislature had put in a mechanism to try to reduce the escalating costs from the grossly underfunded plan. And let me pull that plan up. So here we go. Here we have the Pennsylvania School Employees Pension Plan. And let's just take a look. From 2005 to 2016, Pennsylvania was underfunding this plan on purpose. So they were barely, they weren't even paying 50% of what was owed for several years. They finally woke up, and of course, when you underfund the pension, the required contribution to make up for all of those years of underfunding just escalates. I don't want to talk about these prior years with these obscenely low numbers that are very, very suspicious right now. In any case, so we have it going up here, and then they're paying 100% of the ARC, the annual required contribution, from fiscal year 2017 to 2019. The thing is, you can see this has grown to over 30% of the payroll, and it bids fair to keep growing. And why? Well, let's look at their funding level. And this is partially why the funding amount was so low those first 3 years, and it should not have been, was that it was overfunded in fiscal year 2001. Of course, that overfunding eroded quite rapidly with those very low contributions. And then 2006, it got down to 81, boosted a little bit after a couple more, bull run years. But then, of course, after the financial catastrophe of 2008 and recession into 2009, it has been eroding from 86% down to 56% funded. And now that they've started making full payments, the funding ratio is just creeping up. Well, let's take a look at their return. And you need to understand they're going through 2019 as opposed to 2020 here. So we have a 5-year return has been a little low compared to comparable plans, and same for their 10-year return. And that has its own issues. I am very unhappy with their very high allocation, oh my gosh, to alternatives. 17% to private equity, 16% to hedge funds, 9% to commodities, and 9% to real estate. Less than 50% are kind of the standard core assets, equities, public equities, and fixed income that you usually expect. Over 50% of their assets are what I would call alternatives. And those can be, oh my God. And you can see that in this graph right here. And we going off the cliff. I will talk about asset allocation another time. In any case, one of the problems is that they said, okay, employees don't have to contribute more to the pension if the investments make at least their target return. Well, it was measured 2 basis points over that target. And here's the problem. It's a cliff. When you have a cliff like that, and I have seen this, you can get very bad incentives to goose the results. And this is why there's an investigation to see if there were some kind of corruption or fraud involved in goosing the results for PSERS. Okay? What is amusing to me, very soon after this initial information came out, that several people who have been writing about it put in scare quotes, misstatement, error, hinting very strongly. A lot of people are very skeptical that it was a mistake. It was a mistake on purpose, given how close it was to that 6.36% target. Just enough to go over the limit. Those calculations were called into question at the time, and more recently, they admitted they may have been incorrect. So here is one of the things. First off, having a cliff kicking in like that, and this is one of the problems with public pensions in general, is all of these different cliffs or these one-sided ratchets. In this case, it was something that the employees were trying to avoid. They were trying to avoid an underperformance so that where they might have to contribute a lot more. Let's just pretend instead of 6.38, it was 6.25. What would the employees have had to contribute? How sensitive was it to that? That was something they should have thought about in terms of incentives in trying to put this, you could say, risk-sharing plan together. If it were very sensitive to just a few basis point difference, first off, you'd want to make sure whatever the official measurement was very carefully checked by disinterested parties, uninterested parties, not the firm that does your actuarial work and would like to be paid for the actuarial work for years to come, but maybe some outside body where they weren't going to get a contract. There was nothing, there was basically no way to bribe them. Anyway, so PSERS itself has hired law firms. Aircraft, that's John Burry. FBI is investigating reporting fraud. So this is something I want to point out. It's a $62 billion fund. $25 million is less than 1%, obviously. It's very, very small percentage of the fund. It's 2 basis points. Okay, 2 basis points is teeny, 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 teeny. So this is going to be very interesting. Obviously, this is going to be unfolding. And here's the thing with public pensions in general. What's very interesting are all the shenanigans that public pensions can legally do, and they can do a lot. The sponsoring entities, states, for many of them, such as with this Pennsylvania one, they can underfund their pensions if there's no body over them. If it's not like there's CalPERS or IMRF, so you can have a local pension fund that has nothing looking over it. It's not even just at the state level. They can invest in anything. They don't have to do sane investments at all. The places where they can get in trouble, though, you don't want the IRS to get involved. And that can happen when the benefit value is too high. And that has happened in California for, I think, it might actually be PSERS because it's the university, some of the university employees on CalPERS as well. If the benefits are too high because of the tax deductibility of yada yada, so the IRS can get involved there. So that's one. You can get in trouble if your employees are not covered by Social Security as a public pension, and their pension benefits are too low compared to Social Security. That does not happen too often. So that's another way they can get into trouble. You can get in trouble with the SEC if you're issuing bonds. This happened to Illinois and New Jersey, and the way they reported their pension liabilities made the SEC unhappy. I think they got fined, both states got fined, and they had to change what they were doing. But, you can have insane investments. You can underfund the benefits. You can have stuff like a backdrop and you can have a crazy 8% per year guarantee with Dallas Police and Fire, and you will not get in trouble with the feds. I'm not quite sure, there may be something with regards to investment management. Who can get into trouble can be the asset managers if they defraud the pension. But in general, the pension fund itself doesn't get into trouble. It can be the third-party vendors, and then they can sue them. I'm just thinking criminally, of course. Civilly, you can always have fraud in this, that, and the other. So it is kind of interesting for some of these aspects that you've got to be very careful about if you want to play games with the value of the benefits and this, that, and the other. There's not a lot of standards. Yes, there's GASB and some other things. But again, what's the enforceability? It's just your voters. In general, the federal government is not involved in making sure that these pensions are realistically funded, that they're realistically invested for. None of that. None of it. I think a lot of people don't know that. I knew that. There is oversight for private pensions, and again, not all of them. But for public pensions, there's a lot of things they can legally do. So it should be interesting. Yes, if you're doing investment management, you can get into trouble. This is kind of interesting. There's all sorts of interesting potential corruption in these. So in this case, these are the public officials of PSERS having some very, very pricey travel covered. So that's interesting. And they have various federal probe. So again, I'm not quite sure what exactly, federal corruption, and that's the part I always get a little iffy on. I don't know with regards to federal corruption laws, with regards to state officials, um, of what would be considered corruption or fraud in this case on a federal basis. So I'm not a lawyer, definitely not with regards to fraud. Um, I'm just watching things as they go by. Uh, and I'm just trying to look a little more. Joe DeStefano has written a lot, so he has been covering it a lot locally. And yeah, sometimes um, I do get stories in there twice sometimes. In any case, uh, it has been cracking me up to see the scare quotes around error and stuff like that. So should be interesting to see how that works out. I'm kind of curious to see if any lawsuits or people have to resign or what. So, see y'all.